The leaders of Russia and America have held an urgent phone call in which they discussed Syria and North Korea.
Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump agreed that all parties must do all they can to end the violence in Syria, and they also want to bring an end to terrorism in the country. And in order to achieve those goals, the presidents have agreed to intensify contacts between their top diplomats, Sergei Lavrov and Rex Tillerson. Another thing that the leaders agreed on is that there's an urgent need to use specifically diplomatic means to de-escalate the crisis on the Korean Peninsula. We understand that soon we're going to find out about more phone calls between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in the future. They'll keep up with that practice. And also, they've already discussed their meeting, which is likely to happen with high probability, as the White House and Kremlin are saying, at the G20 summit in Hamburg. Now, just to give you an idea of how anticipated and crucial this meeting was, how desperate the journalists were to find out the details, just take a look at what was happening at Tuesday's White House briefing.
Sean, come on, Sean. Wait a minute.
What about the Putin call?
Sean, where did Sean go?
Russian President Vladimir Putin with Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel on a day that may mark an important development in diplomacy on Syria. Mr. Putin spoke just hours before his phone call with President Trump.
Without the participation of a country like the U.S., it's impossible to resolve this problem effectively. We will continue to be in contact with our American partners, and we hope to reach an understanding on joint steps in this important and sensitive field.
Russia and the US had seemed far apart on Syria ever since President Trump launched 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles almost a month ago that target a Syrian airbase to punish the Assad government for its chemical weapons attack in Khan Sheikhoun in Idlib province that may have killed over 90 people. President Trump has long talked about the idea of safe zones in Syria. Now it seems Russia may also support the idea, even suggesting it might put peacekeepers on the ground. After the telephone conversation, the White House issued a statement. The conversation was a very good one and included the discussion of safe or de-escalation zones to achieve lasting peace for humanitarian and many other reasons.
Vladimir Putin has slammed speculation over alleged Russian interference in the German election as being mere rumours, and added that there was no proof of any Moscow involvement in the American elections.
It never came to our mind to interfere in the political process of other countries. You're referring to the example of the United States, but it was never confirmed by anything or anyone. It's just gossip used in the American internal political battle. And without any evidence, you're making allegations about European countries, including a country as friendly for us as Germany.
She speaks Russian, having grown up in East Germany, and he speaks German from his work for the KGB in Dresden. But despite not having a language barrier, this rare meeting has failed to thaw the frosty ties between Moscow and Berlin.
I would like to say that we have very different positions regarding the reason behind the conflict in eastern Ukraine. We don't share Russian position. We believe the Ukraine government came to power democratically.
The meeting comes as tensions persist between Russia and the EU over the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the conflict in eastern Ukraine, for which to end, the EU says Russia must use its influence with pro-Russian separatists. Russia and Germany have deep differences over many international issues like Syria and Ukraine. However, the EU says it wants to maintain a dialogue with Moscow, so Angela Merkel comes to meet her Russian counterpart. Merkel said she discussed EU economic sanctions with Vladimir Putin, but made it clear dropping sanctions will only happen if Russian-backed rebels abide by a peace agreement in Ukraine.
Jerusalem, a city holy to Muslims, Jews, and Christians, and a major point of tension between Israelis and Palestinians. The UN's Paris-based cultural agency, UNESCO, is wading into the issue once again.
UNESCO has declared Israel an occupying power in Jerusalem. 22 member states voted in Paris in favor of a resolution calling to reject the Israeli sovereignty in the city, with 26 countries abstaining and only 10 supporting Israel, including the United States, the UK, and Germany. In statements given after the vote, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel's ambassador to UNESCO, Carmel Shammah-HaKohen, criticized the resolution.
My goal is to have no votes in UNESCO and Israel. Last year, UNESCO said that the Jewish people have no connection to the Temple Mount. Can you imagine? They said that. We had 3,000 years ago, Solomon built his temple there. And UNESCO said a year ago that we have no connection to the Temple Mount.
President Donald Trump's push for peace in the Middle East continues tomorrow with a rare visit to the White House by Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. In recent days, Abbas met with Egyptian President al-Sisi and Jordanian King Abdullah. Both reiterated their support for a two-state solution between Israelis and Palestinians. As a candidate, Trump vowed to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and enthusiastically backed Israeli settlement expansion in the Palestinian territories. But as president, Trump has adopted a softer tone on settlements and has put the embassy move on hold. Tomorrow's talks come as the militant group Hamas issued a revised political manifesto Monday. Its new charter endorses a Palestinian state alongside Israel with its internationally backed 1967 borders. However, while Hamas removed language calling for the destruction of Israel, it continues to call for armed resistance.
Hamas is not fighting against Jews because they are Jews. Hamas is fighting the aggressive Zionist occupiers.
Palestinian leaders from Hamas to Abbas appear unsure what to make of President Trump's shifty Middle East policies. Abbas, who is under intense pressure at home to protect American funding for his Palestinian Authority and to secure the release of some of the thousands of Palestinian prisoners, many who are currently participating in a hunger strike in Israeli jails. But landing a significant concession from Netanyahu will be difficult given the power of Israel's political right wing. Netanyahu is seeking concessions that the Palestinian president is unlikely to agree to. At a memorial service yesterday, the Israeli prime minister demanded Abbas stop financial payments to Palestinians who carried out attacks on Israelis.
You want to make a real step towards peace that we want? Cancel payments to the murderers. Cancel the law that requires payment to these people. Fund peace, not murder.
Palestinian resistance movement Hamas has warned Tel Aviv to meet the demands of hunger-striking prisoners in Israeli jails. The armed wing of Hamas gave Israel a 24-hour deadline to respond to the demands of Palestinian prisoners. It also warned that Israel would pay the price every day it delayed responding to the issue.
8 people are dead and at least 35 others have been taken to a hospital in Kabul after a suicide bomber targeted a NATO-led convoy on a busy road. The incident happened close to the American embassy.
The area is not very far from the main Resolute Support mission or from the U.S. Embassy. It's also very close to the Afghan intelligence service.
Bilal, any idea as to who might be responsible, any group claiming responsibility for that matter?
I don't know that. I haven't seen anything, but the Taliban had announced their spring offensive. Spring in Afghanistan is about a fighting season, or the so-called fighting season.
The Afghan Taliban has announced the start of its annual spring offensive. The Taliban marked the beginning of Operation Mansouri on April 28th, named after their former leader Mullah Akhtar Mansour, who was killed in a U.S. drone strike last year. The Taliban outlined a dual military and political approach. Politically, they will focus on developing the areas under their control. A U.S. report released earlier this year estimated the Afghan government has uncontested control over only 57% of the country. Militarily, the Taliban will focus on combating foreign forces. Approximately 8,400 U.S. troops are in country supporting the Afghan military. The announcement comes 1 week after Taliban fighters carried out an attack attack on an Afghan military base, killing at least 135 soldiers. The top U.S. commander in Afghanistan said more troops are needed to tip the balance against the Taliban.
It will continue to support the Syrian government by sending more advisors and fighters. The ground forces commander of the Revolutionary Guards said Iran would send more advisors to the resistance front. Iran has also sent volunteer fighters recruited among its own nationals and Shiite communities in neighboring countries.
South Korea and the United States press ahead with their joint military drills amid intensifying tensions with North Korea in the region. The South Korean army is conducting the large-scale war games in the Sea of Japan with the U.S. strike group led by an aircraft carrier. The joint exercise, which seeks to test capabilities to track and intercept ballistic missiles launched by North Korea, is set to continue until sometime next week. The new phase of the joint war games came after the two nations wrapped up a massive annual exercise that involved around 20,000 South Korean and 10,000 U.S. troops.
United States Air Force B-1 bombers have flown over the Korean peninsula twice in the past 7 days. The move has drawn sharp criticism from North Korea, which comes following rising tensions in the region. According to an official, both missions were long planned, and there was a decision to keep a relatively low public profile on the flyovers to avoid increasing the regional temperature. Pyongyang accused the U.S. of intentionally carrying out a military provocation in the area.
CNN has reported that when North Korea tests a nuclear weapon, the blast sends a jolt of energy through the Earth, one that could potentially trigger a volcanic eruption on its border with China. Experts say a sixth nuclear test from the reclusive state is on the horizon, something that's kept the world on edge with tensions on the Korean peninsula rising. If North Korea were to test something big enough, Bruce Bennett, a senior defense analyst at the RAND Corporation, worries the blast could set off an eruption at Mount Paktu. Bennett told CNN that could be an absolutely huge eruption, kill thousands, if not tens of thousands, of Chinese and North Koreans. We don't know if a bigger nuclear explosion will set it off, but it is certainly possible.
On Tuesday, Reuters reports that French far-right presidential challenger Marine Le Pen has said that capital controls could be used if she won the election. In an interview with Reuters, Le Pen reaffirmed that she wanted to take France out of the euro and has hopes for the French people to have a national currency within 2 years. Le Pen said she wanted to replace EU single currency with another, looser type of cooperation in the form of the ECU basket of currencies. Le Pen has called the euro a deadweight on the French economy and said that a new national currency would better protect French people's savings.
If you've ever wondered what it means to be German, how about showing your face? The country's Interior Minister, Thomas de Maizière, has listed 10 key ideas he claims will promote integration. The first of these is we don't wear burqas. Adira Tudor reports.
Well, a lot was said. In fact, Germany's Interior Minister, he claims that defining German culture will help integration. He's quoted as saying, "Wir sind nicht Burka," which means we are not burqa. Thomas de Maizière, he argues that Islamic veils, which completely covers the face, are contrary to democratic coexistence. He also added, we are an open society, we show our face. Also, in his 10-point plan, he included social habits like shaking hands that express national attitudes, education, sport and the arts, Bach and Goethe, as well as traditions including carnivals and folk festivals. But it is his comments about the burqa that have reignited this topical national debate on identity and, of course, immigration ahead of national elections and also following the arrival of more than 1 million refugees. So the debate is going across other countries now. If we take a look at the brief history of where we're at with the burqa ban across Europe. In 2011, France banned the full face covers. Belgium, Bulgaria, Austria followed the lead shortly afterwards, and the ban is still pending in the Netherlands, awaiting Senate approval. It's also a similar story in the UK, where the UKIP leader is to campaign to ban burqa and Sharia laws. That's Paul Nuttall. Here's what he had to say on the subject.
Obviously, we have a heightened security risk at the moment, and for CCTV to be effective, you need to see people's faces, because whether we like it or not, in this country, there's more CCTV per head than anywhere else on the planet, with the most watched people, and for that to be effective, you need to see people's faces.
Well, a May Day rally turned violent in Portland after riots broke out.
Anarchists dressed in all black and covering their faces with bandanas, masks, and helmets clashed with police in downtown Portland. They were throwing rocks and smoke bombs at police. They did considerable vandalism, breaking windows at several businesses, 2 federal courthouses, a hotel, and police vehicles. They also set a couple of street fires by using flares to light trash cans and other debris on fire. Once the violence erupted, the mayor of that city quickly revoked the permit of the May Day protest and declared the situation a full-blown riot. Police arrested 25 people, including 3 juveniles. The criminal charges include disorderly conduct, riot, arson, criminal mischief, theft, and assault. Portland has seen several anti-Trump protests turn violent in recent months, but this was by far the most damage that we've seen in all. There were May Day demonstrations in 41 states with 77 people getting arrested.
It's what doctors had been fearing. Peru's reporting hundreds of possible new cases of dengue fever daily. The viral infection is carried by mosquitoes. It causes flu-like symptoms, and if not caught early, can lead to death.
I felt like I was going to fall, as if I was giving birth. That part at the front of my body, this area at the back hurt. I went to the toilet, and when I sat down, I saw blood.
Obviously, this is worrying. We wouldn't be human beings otherwise in a situation like this. It is obviously concerning, and we will continue with control measures.
Last month's powerful floods were the worst in Peru's history, and it made conditions ripe for mosquitoes.
It affected us greatly, and this water that accumulated here is from the garbage.
Soldiers have been mobilized to help provide medical supplies, and the government has set up mobile clinics and is fumigating homes. It adds to the economic strains of Peru, as it's expected to spend $9 billion over the next 5 years just to rebuild.
Deer ticks are back, and that means Lyme disease is too.
I was probably sick for about 7 to 8 years.
Scott LaValle lives in Dutchess County and wound up debilitated by Lyme, even though he didn't get the typical bullseye rash.
Ringing in the ears, facial numbness, the brain fog, the fatigue, the joint pain, it was pretty brutal.
Unfortunately, many more people could be infected this summer.
Well, we expect it to be a particularly bad year.
Dr. Richard Ostfeld studies tick-borne diseases at the Carey Institute in Millbrook.
Believe it or not, the reason Dr. Ostfeld is predicting a jump in human Lyme disease cases this year is because of these, a bumper crop of acorns that fell from oak trees 2 years ago.
More acorns leads to more mice, leads to more infected ticks, leads to more Lyme disease in us.
Ostfeld says field mice feasted on acorns in the fall of 2015, triggering a domino effect.
They survive the winter well, and they start breeding really early the next spring.
Then, infected ticks use all those mice as hosts.
There's a delay between when the baby ticks bite the mice and when they come out as nymphs and then bite us.
While there's no human Lyme vaccine, experts say protect yourself outdoors by using insect repellent, wearing light-colored clothes so you can see ticks, avoid deep woods, and always do tick checks.
For nervous flyers, nothing about this research is reassuring. Clear air turbulence strikes without warning, and because of climate change, could get worse. The sudden drop came without warning. Anyone not strapped down was shot toward the ceiling, then slammed against the aircraft floor. Video of the aftermath shows the plane scattered with debris. Severe turbulence can be terrifying for unsuspecting passengers, as it was in this Boeing 777 bound for Jakarta last year. Unlike conventional turbulence that occurs when planes fly near weather systems, clear air turbulence happens without the presence of clouds, making it nearly impossible for pilots to detect until it's too late. Dr. Paul Williams is an atmospheric scientist at the University of Reading in England.
We've calculated that the amount of severe turbulence, which is strong enough to hospitalise people, could double or even as much as treble by the end of this century on transatlantic flight routes because of climate change.
According to researchers, rising carbon dioxide levels could destabilize the fast-moving air currents of the transatlantic jet stream, an area that currently sees up to 3,000 flights a day. They predict a 149% spike in severe air turbulence, along with longer travel times, increased delays, and inevitably higher ticket prices.
It's very distressing for pilots precisely because they have no indication or very little indication that that turbulence is sitting out there and that the plane is just about to hit it.
We turn this evening to the urgent warning now that 4 countries are on the brink of famine. 20 million people, families and children. Tonight, right here, we're with the doctors who are in a race against time as we travel with the American woman who runs Save the Children. You're about to see what we witnessed in Somaliland, an autonomous region in northern Somalia, as millions now face starvation across the Horn of Africa.
We set out to reach some of the most remote villages in Somaliland. There's an urgent crisis unfolding largely unnoticed by the rest of the world. Families and children at risk of starvation. In the first village, Harishef, the line begins early in the morning. They know the trucks are coming.
How many hours away?
That would be like 2 hours, close to 2 hours drive, yes.
To get from the nearest water site?
Yes.
Here, it's not just the food they need, but water. Save the Children is trucking it in.
You haven't had a drenching rain here in years.
Yeah, it hasn't rained in close to 3 years now.
Halima, a mother of 5, stands in line. All of her livestock is gone. They have no food. And we asked the last time there was any rain. She remembers the day. It happened once last year. On the hill sit 2 trucks to deliver water for hundreds of families.
If you look over my shoulder here, you'll actually see that this is what it's like as these families come here every single day to get water.
We witness a rush of families trying to get to the hoses that will give them enough water to last just a couple of days. We journey from west to east. 70% of the livestock, the farm animals, have died.
It's really everywhere you look.
This mother is among the many forced to move closer to a village, hoping for food. She had 200 goats. There are just 10 left. And this is now her home. She shows us where she sleeps with her children.
5 sleep here.
Her days are spent worrying about food.
She worries every day.
Yeah.
She's the mother and the father.
Yeah.
As we journey deeper into the desert, we see evidence starvation has set in.
They are on the brink of famine now here. April is supposed to be the wettest month, but as you can see, it is bone dry. Authorities say more than 6 million people are now struggling to find food. 200,000 children are at risk of starvation.
A couple stood helpless as floodwaters filled their truck. 2 young children inside. Omar Villafranca reports guardian angels arrived.
It became a race against time after a baby and toddler were trapped inside this overturned truck in Myrtle Springs, Texas. Their parents, Philip and Emily Ochiltree, were also inside, desperately calling for help.
There's people outside. There are people here, and that's when I started screaming and yelling, "Help, help, help, help us."
When Good Samaritans arrived, the children were nearly dead. The man filming the scene, Tom Mitchell, put his phone down to perform CPR on the little girl.
In the name of Jesus, come on, let him breathe, Lord. This more. There she goes.
The parents say watching the video is hard.
Everything happened so fast.
As soon as they opened the door and they're like, "How many people are in here?" And I said, "Get my 2 kids out now."
Both children will make a full recovery. The toddler, Addie, is still in the hospital, but is stable. Her baby brother, Marshall, is back home. Their parents credit the people who rescued them and got a chance to express their gratitude yesterday.
Thank you so much.
The Ochiltree say they'd like for Addie to meet all the heroes who saved her life.
You want to go save them. You want to help them. But me being all frantic, it's not going to help her any more than I wouldn't have been able to do anything, because I was just wanted to make sure she was okay.
What's the first thing she said to you?
Ma.
Ma.
Ma, with her eyes still closed. Ma. And I was right there, just right there waiting.